And a really big thank you as well to Scott and Simon for what they've given. I mean, hasn't it been fabulous? These three words, simplicity, purity, and obedience, are words that I love. I've sat with them for a long time. I've been a Voyager for, I don't know, it must be getting on 20 years. Is it? Nearly. So they're words that have been a part of me for a long time. And it's lovely just to have time to sit with them and see where they take us. And obedience is a tricky word, isn't it? And I think for a lot of us here, we have mixed feelings about that word. And I think probably for some of us, it's considerably stronger than mixed feelings about that word. It's actually it's a very loaded word. What I want to do this evening is strip away some of the baggage of this word. And as I was thinking about this, I was thinking about a plant one might have, for those of you who are gardeners. You know, you have something it's got a bit big, it's got a bit leggy, some of it is not really very healthy. So you cut it back, you replant it, give it some nurture, and up it comes true to the way it should be. And in a sense, that's what I want to do with this word this evening. I'd like to cut away some stuff. But in cutting it away, I don't want to spend any time thinking about the negatives of obedience. What I want to do is look at the positives of obedience. I want to set it into the setting of love, of God's love. So I'm going to begin with the kind of foundation of God's love and then see where obedience takes us from there. But before we begin, what I'd like to do is just to pause and be quiet. I'm constantly moved by the sense that each moment is sacred. And as we're here this evening with perhaps some fears, some pain, perhaps irritation over a word, we come as we are, with these thoughts, with these feelings, into this sacred presence. Lord, may we know your presence with us. Surround us, fill us. Teach us, Lord, more of your love. Amen. As we begin with the whole idea of setting this word in the context of love, I want us to remember that as we think about this love, it's almost beyond what we can understand. But it is something that we can experience, and probably something that all of us have experienced in different ways. The experience of love. And as we experience that love, I want us to know and to remember that God loves us for who we are, not for the useful job that we might be able to do for God. God loves us for who we are, not for the useful job that God may have for us. In our Western culture, we are steeped in the whole sense of hierarchy. And it's very much there within our church tradition. It's very much there in our culture. It's a natural way we think. Sometimes when I walk through the village and occasionally somebody will stop me and say, I just wonder, could I just tell you this? And would you put a prayer in for him upstairs? It's him up there. And it's natural to all of us. So when we begin to think about obedience, we immediately begin to think of hierarchy and God up there. But it's in all of our culture. It's part of our DNA, this kind of sense of hierarchy. So when we move into thinking more about Trinity, it takes quite a big shift within us. It takes many years, I think, often it does, to stay in that place of being held in love. And I want to begin with a verse you all know so well from 1 John 4. God is love. Those who live in love live in God. God is love. Those who abide in love abide in God. Live in God, not under God. Live in God, not under God. We abide in love. And this, in a sense, is the foundation of Trinity, isn't it? God is self-giving. God gives God's self. This is why Christ and Creator can be one, because one is poured out totally, completely to the other. There is perfect union, but they're both unique. Trinity flows out in that love to each of us. We are united and welcomed into that love. We remain unique, but we are beloved. I think often of Paul's poem in Philippians. Jesus, though he was in the very nature God, did not consider God to be equality with God a thing to be grasped, but humbled himself and became obedient to death, even death on a cross. Obedience, if it's something that we do because we are under God, then it's not a quality to be admired, it's a fact of hierarchy. You need to think about that. If obedience is something we do because we live under God, then it's not a quality to be desired, admired. It's a fact of hierarchy. That shifts things a little bit as well, doesn't it? So what is this obedience? And we could look at the root of the word. In Latin, it's obdire. The ob bit means towards. The odire means to listen, like audible, auditory. It's the same root. So it's listening towards, attentive listening, what Ray used to call deep listening, that listening towards. So what does this obedience mean when we hear that verse? He humbled himself and was obedient to death, even death on a cross. And for me, one of the ways to go into that is to look more intimately at what obedience looks like is to go to Gethsemane. And in Gethsemane we have Jesus saying, "Oh God, take this cup from me. Let this cup pass from me. But not what I will, but what you will." What is this cup? What is this suffering? And I think there's two things here that we need to look at. And all of this feeds into what it means to be obedient. God is love. Christ is one with God. Christ is fully divine. God is love, so God hears our cry of suffering. He hears every one of us in our suffering. He hears, feels, knows so deeply every bit of human suffering that there has ever been. That is the God who loves, who knows every bit of that human suffering, of the world's suffering, the suffering of the cosmos. God is love. Christ in his divinity could hear and know that suffering. Oh God, let this cup pass. Christ in his humanity felt the suffering that we would feel, terror, anguish, all the things that he was going to face. Oh God, let this cup pass. God is human, Jesus is human, Jesus is divine. This is the suffering, his suffering and our suffering. And then he says, not my will, but yours. And that word will is very significant, because as soon as we hear that, we're back into the hierarchy, aren't we? But the word will in the Greek actually means to desire or to long for. I did look up what the Greek word was. I thought I better know what it is, but I can't remember. But it means to long or to desire. Not what I want, not what I'm longing for, but what you long for. Jesus' desire is for the desire of Abba, the desire of the Father, who loves the whole of creation and loves Christ, loves Jesus. What we see here is not Jesus doing what he was told to quieten the anger of a wrathful God. What we see here is Jesus desiring to love and giving himself in love. If obedience is doing what we're told, it doesn't create community, does it? It separates. If obedience is that deep listening, that listening to the other, then it creates community. And do you see how in what Jesus did there, in being obedient, in giving himself, he's creating community. This is the life giver. As Scott said on Friday night, these principles about drawing us to the life giver, this is exactly what Jesus does in that he is the life giver. He's giving us life. He's in his obedience, he's creating community. He's giving us life, life in all its fullness. This is what obedience is. It's not grim determination against the odds, which is what we see will often as, that I will do this. He's obedient to the desire, to the longing for God, and that is just so beautiful, isn't it? Jesus, we see the perfect obedience, that deep, deep listening, both to the Father and to us, to the deep pain and anguish of the earth and the cosmos, and the deep, deep love of the Father, and humbles himself and is obedient to death, even death on a cross. Obedience then is a way of love. It's not being subjected to one above. It's the deep listening that connects us, doesn't it? See how it connects Jesus. See how it connects that deep, beautiful listening. Jesus obeys because he knows in the depth of his being the desire of God. He unites us with the source of all love as he gives himself. He reveals the perfect unity with the God of love, who can do no other than reach out to us. This is obedience. And what I'd like to do here is just to pause for a moment, just to let you ponder and be still, perhaps in thankfulness that we are held in this love. We're not subject to a God who is dominating. We live within a God who is love. We live within a God who is love and who loves us and who desires us with a deep, deep longing. So let's take a couple of moments, and then Julie's going to lead us in a simple Taizé song. Thank you. What does obedience look like then for us? What does it mean to listen deeply? The word obedience has been used across the centuries in the monastic tradition, as Simon said to us, with poverty, chastity, and obedience. And all of us know that when we live in community, when we live with friends, when we live in family, there needs to be a way in which we learn to let go of our desires, our own willfulness. If we're always getting our own way, we do not create any community, do we? We very quickly destroy it. So in the monastic tradition, as people came into a monastery, they would have been encouraged to learn what it meant to be obedient, to listen deeply to those who were guiding them, listen deeply to one another, and to begin to learn to put their own will to one side, to listen first to another. The obedience in that situation, it sometimes was, but it should never have been, and it should never be, doing what you were told. It's about being open to listen. You see how all of these principles is about an openness, isn't it? The simplicity, in a sense, the openness of our hands, or the single fold. I love that. The openness of our hands to receive or to give as God asks of us. The purity, that openness to honor the other. Obedience, that openness to listen first to the other. That's quite hard, isn't it? To set aside our own desires and to listen first to the other. But that was what was taught through the monastic tradition. What a young monk or novice monk coming in would have to learn a way of obedience. We have to learn it, perhaps not as formally, but we have to learn it, don't we, in our families. Otherwise life is deeply uncomfortable. We have to learn to listen to the other. The monastic tradition is something we take that we learn from, and that's so valuable, that way of listening always to the other, practicing that. But what does this look like for us? What does obedience look like in everyday life? If obedience isn't about doing what we're told, It's much more about who we are, our way of being. So let's have an imaginary scenario. Just imagine that there's one of you I know quite well, and I say to you, we need a regional coordinator in the area where you live. It'd be great if you would do that. Now, in our society and our culture, the first response that we might have within us is, oh gosh, I ought to do that. Yeah, I've been asked to do that. I ought to do that, and perhaps because you're a good voyager, you think, oh, obedience, I better do it. But if it's not about doing what you're told, what is it? What is it? So just imagine I've asked you this, and you've gone through the normal loop of, oh gosh, I ought to do that. Oh, I'm far too busy, but I perhaps I'd better, and perhaps a bit of resentment that you've been asked, or perhaps you feel honoured. But so there's some stuff I don't know. Life is very full for you. Your boss has gone off sick. You've got to do extra hours at work. Can you really do it? Can you do it? If obedience is that listening towards that deep listening, then you're going to listen to perhaps what your work colleagues say. You're perhaps going to listen to your family. You're going to listen to your soul friend. You'll listen to the Spirit. You'll listen to your own heart. That is where the obedience is. That is the obedience. That's that way of listening, that way of being that says, yes, I will attend to this. Your answer may well be no, but you've been in obedience because you have listened and considered carefully. You've weighed it up. It's not about doing what you're told. It's so different. And in that, you've created community. You've created community with those who you've talked with and prayed with and talked to. But you've also created community with me, because you will have been honest with me. You will have said no. You might have said why. It might not have been appropriate to say why, but you've said no, and I have to trust that you have listened with care. There's community created. If you just simply did it, there could be overwork, there could be resentment, there could be all sorts of stuff going on. It's not creating community. It's not life-giving. It's that deep, attentive listening. This is what obedience is. It's a way of being. And I think too in soul friendship, and I came back in my mind to that hilarious session that Liz and Jackie did. It was absolutely priceless, wasn't it? And somebody comes in soul friendship, and I'll look at my phone and out the window look at the trees and think, oh gosh, that needs a bit of pruning out there, and oh gosh, I wonder what time dinner is. And I could hear what they're saying, but I'm not listening. And as they come to me and share, and I listen attentively, I'm in obedience to that person. I'm living in obedience. I'm listening attentively, leaning in, leaning towards, in a sense, in my soul, listening to them. And perhaps they might listen to what I reflect back to them, what I might ask. We're creating relationship here, aren't we? We're creating relationship. We're creating something that is life-giving. If I'm hearing but not taking any notice, then it's soul-destroying. We're not creating community. So obedience is a way of being, and it's a mature way of learning to love. It's not an easy way, is it? It's a mature way of learning to love, a way that sets aside our own desires first. Not what I desire, but you, says Jesus. Not my longing, but your longing. It's a setting aside. so that the other has space to flourish and to be heard and to be known. This word is such a troublesome word, but as we hold it in that context of love, in that context of the Trinity of love, not in a hierarchy, I believe it transforms the word. To live in obedience then, of listening to one another, listening to creation, listening to the Spirit. That is what's asked of us in obedience. And to me, that is a precious and beautiful thing. This is obedience. This is the way of obedience. So I'm going to pause there because it's evening and folks will be weary. I'm going to stop there. What I'd like you to do is, if you would like, again, just to get into little groups and the same sort of questions. What's stood out to you? Are the questions you're left with? What has shifted for you in thinking about obedience? If you're happy to share that together, then please feel free. If you want just a bit of time on your own to reflect, then that's absolutely fine. And we'll come back together in about 15 minutes, yes. And see where we go from there. Okay, so. Shall we begin to draw to a close? Didn't we? When you're ready, if you want to come back together, that will be good. There's no rush. You've all shared so much together, there may not be anything that you need to or want to contribute all together in a kind of plenary session, but are there anything anyone wants to reflect back on what you've heard this evening, how you've been moved this evening? Anything anyone wants to say? Elaine.
I'm Elaine. It's just Penny when you said that sometimes in obedience you have to say no. For me, it's usually been about you listen and then you do something based on what you've been listening to. And sometimes that's a no. I've not really thought about obedience as being a no. It's not a no. It's always been you listen and then you do what you're being told to do. So when you say no, it's not as an answer. That's a new thing for me. So I think the microphone's going to go on and off.
The battery's going, yeah. Thank you, Elaine. Yes, thank you. If obedience is the listening towards our way of being and not the doing what we're told, then sometimes the answer will be no. Yeah. It's going back to the root of the word again, isn't it? It's letting go of some of the baggage that we've got attached to it. Sorry. Anything else? Simon's and Diana.
Thank you for that example that you gave us. I found that really helpful in my understanding, and I feel that I've heard people say before that listening was important in obedience, but you gave that example of asking somebody to do something, and that really made it concrete and understandable in a new way for me. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Good. Good. Simon. I think it's my earring. Oh.
As I was reflecting, this is really just wanting to throw something in, kind of in support of what you've been saying. But when you were talking about some of the scripture passages in the New Testament that unpack that idea of faith, one that occurred to me that you didn't mention is the beginning of Romans, where Paul is introducing himself to the Roman church and talking about what his commission from God is. And he says that his task, and the phrasing is really interesting, is to bring about the obedience of faith, or the obedience that comes from faith, depending how you translate it, amongst all the nations. And I just think it's really interesting, the fusing of obedience and faith in that concept there, that and as he unpacks it furthermore, that as you come into Christ, and you were using that abiding language, but in John, and are indwelt by the Spirit, you then begin to live out from within that obedience and that walk with God. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to throw that one in with the
Thank
other
you,
stuff
Simon.
that you'd given.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you.
To reinforce that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Really following on from that, we were talking about how so much this beautiful idea that Jesus heard the Father's heart and was listening to the Father's heart, his will, his desire, and how for us it's saying yes and aligning ourselves, I suppose, to the desires that God has. And that God has for us. And they're all good.
Yes.
Those desires for us are good. He makes his face shine upon us and brings his shalom. And we were talking about how in Genesis he looked at what he created and he saw it was good. And that good is like, it is as it should be. And I suppose for us, in our journey, it's not like this ladder, as Simon was saying, that we've got to climb up and get holier and holier and more obedient, more obedient. We're actually on this road of discovering God's desire for how he's made us to be.
Yes.
And saying yes to it.
Yes.
And stepping into that more and more and more. And sort of aligning ourselves as the whole nations. His desire for the nations. And we say, yes, God, your desire for this nation, we want this too. We care about this too.
Yeah.
And that is obedience.
Yes.
But how that really resonates with us, because it's who we should be. Who we can be. It's kind of this beautiful thing that we only fit together when we're truly ourselves.
Yes.
And only I can be me, and only you can be you. And it's only when this beautiful still point of life, that fantastic, that quote that we, of all the trillions of still points, of light,
Light.
joined together, is the glory of God. And in a sense, that is exactly what the obedience is, isn't it? It's letting this still point of light shine of who we are. And Nigel was saying how he thought of obedience was like having to do stuff that you really didn't want to do.
Absolutely, yes.
About the missionary thing.
I know we grew up with these missionary meetings, and there was a call, and it, you were just scared that God was going to send you to the deepest, darkest Africa, and you just hated warm climates, but I want to share something else, just which some people may be able to identify with, because I've realised that a direct someone asking me directly to do something is a trigger point for me. Mm-hmm. Because of a previous relationship where all of the voices whom I trusted for counsel and advice and direction weren't trusted by, another person. And it became very, very difficult to hear, even though I knew what God was saying, but the situation, like I told myself, I'm doing this out of obedience, but it wasn't obedience, it was control. Without going into all that. Yeah. And I have had to learn how to process why direct commands for me are a trigger point. Yeah. And this view I grew up with of God being the tyrant and being not pleased with me if I didn't read my Bible for 20 minutes every day. Those things were taught to me as obedience, and they're not. I'm so glad that, I suppose, 12, 15 years ago, I've had a complete mindset, and the song we did this morning had very different lyrics when it was first written. Creator God, reveal the person I should be was the lyric that I wrote 20 years ago, and it's a new song now because I changed it to the person I can be. Yes. But this is a life lesson. But the one thing to say about difficult stuff that I've been through. The bruises that we all have and the scars that we have become the person that we are because God redeems them and makes us stronger because our roots are deeper.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you. And I'm so glad you said all of that, Nigel. It's because it's so true, and it's still steeped in us, isn't it? That we think that when God has something for us to do, it's going to be something that's tough and we're not going to like very much. It's a kind of go-to default. That's the word. Thank you. Default setting in us. But when we think about desire and longing, what do you want? Because God's desire is planted in us, and we find that our desire is God's desire. And that's a beautiful thing, isn't it? And doesn't that make obedience the most wonderful thing? It's just so precious. It's about life and joy. Yes, there will be hardship and there will be pain, but Christ, through his obedience, his love, his listening, has entered fully into that. And we're redeemed and loved and held. So obedience is a beautiful thing now, and the word has to be redeemed. And for many of us, the pain is there. And Nigel, thank you. And I also went to those meetings where, you had to go. Actually, it's quite a lovely story. Actually, I remember going to various Pentecostal meetings. Because I really wanted to speak in tongues. And I can remember being prayed over and kneeling and then putting their hands on me and praying, and nothing happened. So they'd be shouting over me and then shouting in my ears, and I just couldn't do it. I was sort of 16 or something. I was horrendous, isn't it, when you think about it? And then I went to a gathering, and I'd had that sense that I ought to be going abroad and serving abroad, because that's what you did in those days. You went to be a missionary if you were a proper Christian. And as I knelt there and prayed through this, and nobody shouting in my ears, I hasten to add, I suddenly sensed that God didn't need me to go, and I was released, and the tongues came. And it was just such a setting free. And there was obedience, and it was so easy, because it's actually what I wanted anyway. In fact, both of them, you know, it was... And God is so good in the way he listens to our heart and leads us. Yeah.
Thank you, Penny. As usual, that was brilliant. I want to ask you a question on obedience. What struck me was about community. And it makes sense. I'm in a situation at the moment. I'm actually going back tonight under obedience. You've really given me... For the last 2 days, I've been going back and forth, spoken to myself. I'm understanding now what creates community. My one, a bit like Nigel, I think is a trigger point, trust. So I've had a no from somebody, and they said, we review it in 6 months' time. I'm now recognising it's about trust, because how do I know that person's listening to God? Getting that mutual bit. Yeah.
You don't know, do you? There's something about making sure that you are in a safe place, that you have people around you that support you. You don't know whether somebody else is going to listen to God or not. If you're questioning it, that it will, then that needs to be listened to, because you may have an insight there. Yeah.
Especially having lived with the sisters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. There's one at the back. I can't see who it is. Elizabeth.
Thank you, Penny, for giving such a positive obedience, being listening, attentively listening and considering. But the question that, where does requirement come in here? Sorry to throw that in, but that's what we got to in our discussion.
What does the Lord require of you? Is that what you're thinking? Where are you going with this?
Not just what the Lord requires, but when we've made commitment to fulfill a function, maybe, are there certain requirements of that? So I'm not thinking just in the church situation, but in our daily lives. Does that?
There's responsibilities we have. And sometimes that means we have to do things that we don't actually feel like doing. So the listening, the deep listening, doesn't necessarily mean it's all going to be nice and easy. But it does mean that you are consenting to what needs to be done for as long and as far as it needs to be done. When that becomes the place where it's not for you anymore, like Scott was saying, it's time to hand it on. But yeah, requirement, responsibility is part of life, isn't it? I mean, we all have to do things that, we're tired, we don't want to do, or the workload has got bigger, but it's got to be finished. But that's all part of listening, isn't it? We can't go through life only doing the things we want to do and everything being fine. It just ain't going to be like that, is it? And perhaps in the giving of ourselves, in the setting aside of our own desires, in that place of requirement, we're actually listening to what the other needs from us, and that is important in that setting. Does that help? Okay, good.
Hi, it's Johanna. Oh, that does work. And I'm not sure whether I'm opening an unnecessary can of worms here, but I'm wondering whether some of us might need to reflect on how gender plays into our understanding of obedience. I became a Christian at the moment my eldest child was born. She's now 36. And I came to faith in a church that knew that being a good Christian woman was obeying your husband. And I trained for leadership in a church that only just thought that women could be leaders. In a college that wasn't entirely convinced that women could be leaders. I still work for a church that isn't entirely sure what it thinks about women in leadership, and whether women can make the sorts of decisions, can do that listening, can be obedient all by themselves. It's also something about how, as a community, we support each other and nurture each other
Yes.
in being able to do that listening.
Yeah. Thank you, Johanna. Thank you. I think the community part is really important there, the supporting one another through the struggles, wherever we are in these struggles. And it comes back to the purity as well, doesn't it? To the intention to honour and to respect. To honour and respect the person whose views are different to you, but also to honour and respect the person that you are, that you have been made to be, you who are beloved of God, and being true to I'm struggling for the words. Community is important. The support is really important, and the ability to be open together. Yeah. To share those times of pain. And there's lots of it. Yeah.
But we learn to listen by other people hearing that we are listening.
We learn to listen by hearing that.
It's part of being affirmed in what we're hearing is part of how we learn to listen.
Yes. 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 Yeah. Thank you.
So, following on from what Simon was saying about obedience of faith, and one of my verses I think about a lot is in Romans 6 and 17. Thanks be to God that they were slaves of sin. You became obedient from the heart to that form of teaching to which you were committed. So, in the context of community, it's been excellent to spend time around God's word, that form of teaching, and we're obedient to it because we're obedient from the heart. It's the love of God and his love impacting us and his spirit within us, so that we then become freed from sin. We become slaves of righteousness, slaves in inverted commas, because it's a love story.
Yes.
It's like the newly married husband, just loves to make tea in the morning for his wife, not because he's been told to.
Yes. Yes. And the obedience of the heart. And isn't that different to the obedience of the mind? And I can think... Oh, absolutely.
We can have some group think going on and convince ourselves to do, and some groups do, there's some wacky things. So we need to be well taught.
Yes.
And have our minds straight.
Yes.
As well as our hearts.
Yes. There's that lovely saying, isn't it? Descend with your mind into your heart, and there stand before the face of Christ. And that's Theophan the recluse who says that. And obedience of the heart. I think of all the years I had within church where there were things that I was unhappy about, unsure about, like Johanna would say, and there was something different in my heart. I ought to believe these things, I ought to know these things, I ought to do these things, but there's something uncomfortable in me. And I needed to listen to my heart. And I'm so thankful. One of the joys of getting older, isn't it, is you can begin to think about and take note of what's in your heart and be obedient to that. But not dispensing, and I'm not in any way saying dispense with our minds and the thinking and the understanding of the Word of God that is so precious. Yeah, thank you. Well, you can go and get a cup of coffee or tea, or you can't actually, it's shut. Sorry about that. Night prayer is at 9 unless we bring it forward, but do you want this one?
Right,